You know what an awful lot of people come to me with inherited property issues, and they don't always realize there are problems that they haven't seen yet. Often when people come to us, they've actually had an opportunity to talk to a loved one, right before they're passing. It's not very common that a loved one's going to tell them about, the bills, and this is where the checkbook is, this is in the top drawer of the desk, and those types of things. They're going to talk about things that are really important, near and dear things, stories that they want to make sure that are heard. What they won't tell you is likely about the mortgage that's got 3 months down. They're not going to tell you about the tax bill that they kept throwing in the trash. They're not going to tell you about the dispute they had with somebody else and the judgment lien from the car company or the credit card company. They're not going to tell you that kind of stuff. They're going to focus on things about between people. So one of the big things that I think is difficult to understand is that after someone's passing, you start digging through the paperwork and finding what the real facts were. You discover there's a lot of things we don't know about our parents. Hopefully it's nothing awful. I've heard some pretty strange stories. So what I'm going to encourage you to consider doing is, if you are somebody who is inheriting a property or involved with an estate or a trust, is that you be certainly kind to yourself and to others, because they're going to be looking at what you do with that paperwork. Now, if somebody is taking the paperwork out, you may have problems. So you may want to make sure you've got some kind of control and secure the house, the property, and the paperwork, and keep them in one place. I suggest some kind of a file and start looking for the important documents, because when you're in the crunch and there's a time element and all that, you don't want to have to be scampering looking for those things. The ideal client that comes to us has big problems that we can solve, because they come to us, they're overwhelmed, there's just all these things going on. They got people who are putting this message in their ear, and then they talk to maybe an attorney or two, and the attorney gives them some things they don't want to hear. Maybe they've called a couple of lenders, they've called the bank with the stagecoach, or the bank with the happy fists, or whatever like that, and nobody has any interest in helping them. So I'm very comfortable with people who are in overwhelm mode, and they're just not getting any good answers. Now, part of the problem that also comes about is that when someone starts the process, not all of the problems are obvious. Some of the problems don't materialize at all. But let's say that they have a property and they have a tenant in there. Let's say they have a property with a relative. The relative moves out, leaves a spouse or a boyfriend or the baby daddy or whatever like that, and they're not paying and all that. And so now what you have is a house that you are inheriting and someone else is living in, and you can't get them out. They're a holdover tenant, or what you'd probably think of as being a squatter. So that could be a big issue, and you're going to have to hire an attorney, and it can be done in the probate court. Started to open up a probate for no other reason, but you're going to have to find some way to be able to get this person out. It's highly likely in today's world that even if the laws favor being able to get them removed, you'll probably have to spend some money, maybe even give them some money to make them move. One of the frustrating things that occurs sometimes, in fact, fairly regularly, are people who come to us and we have a direct conversation. I like to ask the big question, what do you want to see happen? Then I learned that they're a little overconfident, and that can be a problem, because what happens is their expectations are difficult to manage. Maybe they even have a free and clear property. They know that they've been qualified for a bank loan at their big bank, or there's all these things they can do in their personal life. Well, that's not the same. It's not the same as when you're in charge of an estate or trust in your capacity as an executor or administrator, or even as a successor trustee of a trust, for example. Because in that role, you're acting as a fiduciary. And so the probate estate or a trust is actually as an entity. Just like a corporation or company is an entity, you're responsible for acting on behalf of this entity. So your personal income and taxes don't figure in. Maybe the probate court requires you to get a bond, you may have to, but for the purposes of conducting your job as a fiduciary, they look at your character in your ability to separate things and not commingle your own personal finances with the estate finances, even if you're a sole heir.